This case was continued from May 28, 2015, case number PDR 1211696. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 5-story, 71-unit multifamily residential building with 161 parking spaces in 2 levels of semi-subterranean garage. The subject site is approximately 31,250 square feet, and it is located within the SFMU zone, which is one of our mixed-use zones in the city. The units will be a mix of 1 studio unit, 18 one-bedrooms, and 52 two-bedroom units. The project amenities include about 6,000 square feet of common open space, consisting of a swimming pool, common areas, and a landscape sun deck. There will also be a tot lot within the common open space. The project also incorporates a 761 square foot recreation room, as well as private balconies for all units. The proposed development consists of stacked flats surrounding a centralized courtyard. Each unit is accessible from the central courtyard via an elevator and exterior walkway. Some of the units fronting Elk Avenue are also accessible from the sidewalk of Elk Avenue, which have their own stoops. Underground parking will be served by a ramp located midpoint on the building facade and adjacent to the recreation room. So the subject site is comprised of 2 adjoining lots. This site is developed with a 1-story warehouse building and a surface parking lot. Both the building and the parking lot will be demolished. The project site is located in a transition neighborhood due to the zoning designation of this area. As I stated earlier, the subject site and properties on the north side of Elk is zoned SFMU, and the properties south of the subject site are zoned R2250, which is our traditional multifamily zone. The subject site is also located within the Pacific Edison neighborhood. So because of this mix, you see some single-family homes which are still in existence on the south side of the subject site, as well as multifamily development and commercial uses along Colorado Street, which you can see on that aerial photo as well as the photo montage behind you. As by way of some background, in March 2007, the redevelopment agency, or the former redevelopment agency, approved a 4-story, 54-unit residential-only building in a contemporary style for this site, which is essentially the same project, only 16 units less than the one you're reviewing today. However, the entitled project was never constructed, so the approval expired after 2 years from the approval date. The proposed project currently was originally scheduled to be considered by the City Council on December 16, 2014. It was continued and later taken off the calendar when the City Council extends the Design Review Board authority to review projects within the San Fernando Road corridor. So this is where we are today. The arrangements of the units are reflective of the stacked flats building typology surrounding a central courtyard. The building footprint occupies most of the lot area with the exception of the landscape areas within the front, side, and rear setback. The majority of the common open space is located within the central courtyard, and private open spaces are met by inclusion of private balconies. Some ground floor units, as I stated earlier, are accessible from the street. The recreation room also front the street, so in this sense, it enhanced the pedestrian experience since they visually connect this room to the street. The building mass is also achieved primarily through articulation coupled with variation in building materials and color. As you can see behind you, the base of the building will be treated with stucco, as well as the top, 4th and 5th floor. And the middle section of the building will be treated with hardy board horizontal siding. So you see a mix of materials and colors, as well as some accent colors for the awnings and the trellises. The proposed project reflects a contemporary architectural style with influences of the Craftsman design. So the blending of the contemporary and traditional features make the overall design appropriate to this neighborhood, since it is eclectic in terms of the mix of architectural style. But also, it's also identifiable on its own. So staff also included a detailed memo of the principal urban designers from the principal urban designer discussing the project architectural style, site planning, mass and scale, and the building design and detailing, which we'll provide it to you in the packet. A final environmental impact report for the project was prepared and submitted for your review as well. The EIR analyzed potential environmental effects relating to the following topics: aesthetics, air quality and greenhouse gas emission, land use and planning, noise, public services, recreation and utilities, and service systems. The final EIR identifies significant and unavoidable impacts to short-term project-specific construction and noise vibration, long-term exterior noise impacts due to vehicle operations to private outdoor balconies or patios, long-term project-specific and cumulative impacts to recreation resources, cumulative fire service impacts, cumulative police service impacts, and cumulative solid waste impacts. The EIR consultant is in the audience tonight and is available to answer any question you may have regarding the final EIR. Staff recommends that the Design Review Board certify the EIR and adopt a statement of overriding consideration and approve the project design without any condition. This concludes staff presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wong.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Not at this point.
No, at this point. Mr. Martin? No? I had a couple of questions on the EIR. Is it wise to ask for it now, or is it?
I can start on the EIR questions, right?
Yeah. We can start. Can I ask questions on the EIR? I mean, this pertains to the environment, the surrounding environment. I noticed the street on the ISIS project is pulled in or dedicated a few feet. Is the dedication going to continue on this project? Something that the EIR did not get into.
I don't think that's the part that's discussed in the EIR, but we did speak with our city engineer. They're requiring a 1-foot dedication along the street, but ultimately the street will be widened 3 feet as part of the project, and so it'll be aligned with the existing street along ISIS. So, from what I understand, the 1-foot dedication will be to address the sidewalk width to maintain the same street width and the same sidewalk width as the ISIS, the former ISIS project is what it's called, Brio now, I think.
Yes.
But eventually it will line up with...
It will line up, yes. Excuse me.
Now, can you go over the trip generation on the vehicular trip generation on this project? I know you have... What's the threshold? Is it 50?
Yeah, it's the threshold to do a traffic analysis will be 50 a.m. or p.m. peak trips. Wayne Coe is here from the traffic section, and he can answer some more specific questions towards that.
I understand on the EIR it talks about the solstice of the sun and shadow, and I see that, and it pertains to the adjacent buildings. But I also, when I'm reviewing the document, I noticed the shade and shadow on the courtyard. Is that something that separate, or is it separate?
Yeah, for CEQA, we're required to look at the impacts that the project has on its surrounding environment. it doesn't necessarily address the shade and shadow potential issues for the project itself. So it'd only be looking at the buildings surrounding the property.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's going to be I guess there's going to be some kind of design considerations you guys look at, but it's not like really an EIR question or an EIR concern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. I have Mr. Rodney Khan.
Good evening, Chairman, board members, and city staff. My name is Rodney Khan. My offices are located on Brand Boulevard here in the city of Glendale. As pointed out, our project site is actually directly adjacent to the 200-unit ISIS project, or formerly known as ISIS Brio project. We're also, if you look at the Google image, we're about a block south. About a block south of us is the Pacific Edison Elementary School and Park, and a few hundred feet west of us is the Interstate 5 freeway. So for our residents and guests, access to our site is easy and convenient, and they do not need to travel through other neighborhoods to get there. A few items I'd like to emphasize. One of the items that needs to be pointed out is we designed this project to be 100% code compliant. So there's no variances, there's no deviations, there's no exceptions from the code. The next is talked a little bit about the history. I'd like to emphasize that a little bit more. This project site and this project was approved by City Council back in 2007. It was a 54-unit project. It had a very same site plan, same courtyard open space. The project laid out very similar. The difference is now we have 17 additional units and 1 additional story. We worked with your design studio staff along with our case planner when we submitted the revised project. This project was submitted back in May of 2012. We worked with them. We talked about different ways to improve the project. And some 2 years later, we received a letter from the City of Glendale that informed us that we needed to perform an environmental impact report. As you can imagine, 2 years later, we were hoping that if something like that was to occur, it would occur either at the time we submitted the project or shortly thereafter. Unfortunately, and still to this day, we don't have an explanation as to why that happened, but it did happen. Nevertheless, we dealt with it. We hired our environmental consultant. We performed the environmental impact report. There were no comments from the neighbors. There were no comments from other governmental agencies on that report. As staff mentioned, our project consists of 71 units, and a large majority of those units are 2-bedroom units. About 75% of them are. The other thing about this project that's a little bit different than some of the other projects that have been reviewed and approved and constructed over the last few years is that our unit sizes are larger than what we've been seeing in the area. Our 1-bedroom unit size, for example, is 825 square feet. Our 2-bedroom unit size is 1,300 square feet, which is larger, much larger than some of the other projects. We have both private open space in the form of patios and balconies, and we have common open space in the form of a children's outdoor play area, swimming pool, recreation, and landscaped areas. It's been almost 3 years for us to get in front of you here today. So we're very excited to be in front of you. We're hoping for your approval and a resolution to this project here this evening. With me today, I have Varouj Saroyan, who's our architect. We have Alan Chachi, who is the owner of the property, the owner of the business on the property, and the developer of this project. I have Tony Lacacciato, who performed our environmental impact report. We have Nicole Martin, our land use attorney. And we also have Larry Tyson, our landscape architect. So our entire project team is here today. If you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them. That
Thank you,
concludes
Mr.
our
Khan.
presentation. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Khan?
Yes, I just have one general question. So in this 2 years of the, since May of 2012, for 2 years of design review process, was the design evolved from the day that you guys started, or has it been more of kind of fine-tuning, or I mean, because kind of remember what we 2007 the 4-story version of this, and it feels to me it was fairly similar to what we had, so not much has changed. But was there any major decisions that was made either by the team or the staff that I should know about? Or
Board Member Malikian, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, I'd defer that to our architect.
Okay.
And he can tell you what he envisions or those changes being. We worked with a number of the different design studio staff. I think we've worked with each one of them, and even ones that have left the city, we work with them on this. So I think they each had some input. The types of changes, though, I'd rather the architect explain that to you.
great, thank you.
My only question is the reason for adding, you said you added 17 units. Was there a specific reason for adding that other than?
I think what happened, Board Member Palmer, is when we originally went through the entitlement process, there was not a 200-unit, 5-story building next to us. And that's the Brio/ISIS project that you see next to us. So in terms of the context, it made sense for us also to add additional units and story as well.
So, Mr. Khan, that you said a story, it's actually 5 stories now with mezzanine, so it's almost 6-story, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Khan.
Thank you.
I have Nicole Martin.
You. Good evening. I'll keep this very brief. Nicole Martin. I'm located at 663 West 5th Street in downtown Los Angeles, and I'm the land use attorney on behalf of the applicant. And just very briefly, this is a very good project. I've thoroughly reviewed it and been a part of this project team. And really, we've been in the pipeline and ready and waiting for this approval. Really adhering to all the requests that the staff has, and it's been thoroughly vetted by staff and members of your council as well. So with that in mind, I'd like to answer any legal questions you may have and turn it back over to my project team this time. So thank you.
Any questions? No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll go with Mr. Alan Chachi. Chachi, sorry.
Good afternoon, board members, staff. My name is Alan Chachi. I'm the owner of the property at 525 West Elk, the project in front of you. I've lived and worked in Glendale for 31 years. I've operated my business from that property, from that location, for the last 26 years. As it was mentioned, this project has been on its way for a long time. It's finally here. Now, I do believe we have a good project. It's going to improve the neighborhood greatly. I have all the people who's had any hand in the project here to answer any questions you may have. I would appreciate it if you guys review it and give us our approval so we can move forward. I thank you in advance, and I'll be sitting here in case you have any questions. If you have any questions now or later, I'll be here.
No question?
Thank you. Thank you.
I have Mr. Tyson, or not now? Okay. That's all I have. I don't have a card from Mr. Saroyan. Are you?
Just with any questions.
Do you have a question to Mr. Saroyan? Yeah? Why don't you call? Then you can fill out the card.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Varush Saroyan. I'm the architect of record. I'm here for any questions.
So if I may,
Sure.
So the question was that just kind of briefly give me the history about the design evolution of since the 54 units or 50 plus units to current of the 2 years. Was it more of an evolution of what the need of the Mr. Chachi was, or was it as an evolution of just all the design review, the process that you went through before it came in front of us? So I just want to know, because I remember slightly what it was, and it's grown, but I just want to get a feel of how it's gotten to this point. That's my first question.
Okay. Actually, the way I can phrase it is that it was an evolution of the fine-tuning, basically, because the footprint of the building hasn't changed that much. In the previous design, we had two podium deck elevations. One was lower than the other. Somehow we managed to make it just one piece, so it's just one level podium now instead of being two levels. On the 54 unit, we had two levels of probably about 3 or 4 feet elevation difference. One was almost level with the sidewalk. The other one was about 3 foot 6 inches or 4 feet higher than the lower one. But now it's all one-piece podium, one-level podium. There were some changes in the materials, colors, textures, size of balconies, the front patios, some changes in the areas that was landscape, adding or making the swimming pool a little bit larger. The location was slightly changed, the swimming pool location. And then about a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago, I don't remember exactly when, we kind of chipped off the front mezzanine at the front units, with the exception of the tower at the southeasterly corner. Also, in the middle of the design,
was a decision made
it was basically from the design studio side, and we integrated that in our design. We changed the design accordingly. And also, at the initial submittal of this version, we submitted the plans with a 3-foot dedication, but later it was revised into 1 foot. We received a notice from engineering department that they don't need the additional 2-foot dedication. Those are the basic or major changes. Other than that, there are a lot of fine-tunings here and there.
We just received the landscape plan. The landscape plan and the site plan has different location of,
yes.
On the east and the west and the north side. The landscape is against the building versus the site plan that is against the property line. Should we assume that the landscape plan would be the governing
That's true.
landscape?
Yes.
Okay.
The one you submitted today.
Yes.
Okay.
And then my last question, and I'm glad that kind of gone through the plans, and I saw some of these, the windows that are facing south, they seem large and lower than the code allows for the balcony projection and so forth. So I'm glad that I saw the railings that you've placed in on the
Behind
inside,
yes.
behind
From
the glass,
inside.
which is
That's true.
It alleviates my concern that later on when you go through the building and those changes will occur. The question that has, I've kind of looked at this, and the awnings on the top level gives a really interesting character to the top. Would you oppose to add more awnings on the south-facing windows to give shade and shadows and create some shadowing within the units, or is it something that it's...
In my humble opinion, I think it will enhance the design.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's it. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank
To
you.
follow up to one of the questions, Mr. Saroyan, so in addition to all this fine-tuning, there was another floor added, then the tower?
Yes.
So, okay. Ms. Palmer?
I had the same question you had. The only other question I have is there any room for bike storage within the parking areas?
I think
I
we
don't
have
see any.
called out the bike areas, if I may.
I might have missed them.
Yeah, I had the same question. I didn't think I saw it, but we can incorporate that somehow. So since I have you here, how are you dealing with mailboxes, gas meters, and so forth?
The gas meters will be installed on one side, on one of the side setbacks.
So there is room to make.
There is a room for that, yes. All the other meters will be in the subterranean parking. I have a couple of rooms there that are not required trash or recycle areas. Those rooms can be utilized for bike parking.
And mailboxes
At the front entry?
within that lobby area
Yes.
or outside?
No, the lobby area.
Lobby.
Yeah.
My other question, I know you on the garage on the building and the subterranean, you have power poles in the back.
Yes.
And are those heights gonna, the power pole clearances gonna affect the building?
Yes, it will. We had probably 3 or 4 meetings with GWP.
Okay.
We know that we're going to reroute the lines over there, including the telephone and the cable lines, and it will require a fee, which hopefully
So
after the approval.
Will be removed?
Yes.
Because that's the only way you're gonna make this thing
That's
work
true.
in the
Yes.
back. Okay, that answers my other question.
How are you getting the trash out of the trash areas?
Any of the small trucks, yeah.
Was there any consideration given to, I appreciate the fact that you have those units facing Elk, have stoops coming in, but have you thought of making them a true entry to those units? It would be, maybe that's my thought on it.
The units that can be accessed by the handicap, well, the wheelchair, yes, we can do it. The ones that have steps up, unfortunately, I cannot call it as a legal entry.
Yeah, but you still can enter from the courtyard to that unit, just like what you have now. I mean, instead of a slider.
Change the
Yeah.
to a door.
Having these units, I think will be a nice gesture to the street, unless if you have any restrictions on it. My other question, actually, it's a floor plan. I know I shouldn't get into it, but like the front units, especially the corner ones, the only natural light you get to this living room, dining room, and the kitchen is from the Elk. Is that what I'm understanding?
There are a couple of units that just behind, from the court side, we have a corridor there, and we cannot have any windows there.
No, I'm talking about the corner ones.
The corner ones, we don't have access to light.
Yeah, I mean, the corner ones, the only light you have for the living room is from that front.
Yes.
That patio. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes. Since the planting is against the building, correct?
Yes.
How tall are those planters, and does that conflict with any of the windows around there?
I think we have a note on our revised landscaping plan that for 24 inches boxes, it's 26 inches depth, and for 36 and 48, it's 36 inches, and all of them are going to be lower than the window sill.
Going to be lowered?
And the window sill.
Because if you've got those sizes, they're going to have to be 6 inches above. A 48-inch box, you're going to go 6 inches above that, so that might conflict with them. Might have to be lowered. Planters lowered, and I don't know if that's possible. That's just something to check.
Sure.
Sorry, and I know maybe this is the fire department requirement for access around the building. That's why the landscape is changing. But do you still have access from the sides, do you still need that landscaping to go against the building in the back?
I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
You see, on the original plan that we saw,
Yeah.
the landscaping was in the parameter of the
Yes.
structure, but now it's against the building. Now, I understand maybe where you have your access from the courtyard from the sides.
I kind of like the way the new design is, I think.
Well, the reason that we changed that because back about a while ago, I don't remember exactly when, I had a sort of a code discussion with fire department and the building department, and they kind of asked me to push the exit path of travel
As
as
far
far
away
as
as
possible. Yeah.
But in this case, my exit path of travel is through the courtyard and to the side, out through this way. I mean,
That's true, but
the reason I'm questioning it because when you push these planters against this building, it limits the foliage on the tree. I mean, if we're going to have some mature tree, it's just going to be right against this wall.
But what I'm thinking is that once you put the landscaping against that, if people are walking by it, they're not going to walk by right next to your
Yeah, there's
bedroom.
that
And
other
I think
screen.
it's like a.
It's got oak trees right in a 4-foot planter again.
Well, I think we got to go through that landscape area, and I think areas that we have windows and doors, I would rather have the landscaping against so that people are not kind of walking and kind
I
of
agree,
sneaking
because of the
in.
height.
And I think it can be worked on so that we can figure out what trees and so.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Sorry, I noticed on the elevations you have masonite siding.
Yes.
Is that something that, I mean, we haven't been using masonite for years, I used to use them in the 80s to replicate wood. I think on this building, masonite is not the direction to go with it. If you want to, it's just also for durability. You've been in the business for a long time.
You have a suggestion?
Can you tell me what slashed brick is? I don't
There's
know.
two colors. Yeah. Some accent
Okay.
color with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Saroyan. Stay tuned, please.
So,
I have some questions on the IR. I want to have the IR consultant come up. Do you have any questions on there, or is it only? Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Tony Locacciato with Meridian Consultants. Thank you for reading it.
Yeah. When they deliver it to me, I second thought.
You said, what has our city council done to us? Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
5 gallons of coffee.
Black.
When I got to the charts, then I said, okay, enough with the. Okay, my question is, can you please elaborate on the alternatives of how you reach the conclusion, the chosen conclusion, and also on the trip generation on the parking, on the
Yes,
traffic.
I'd be happy to. First, maybe I'll start with the trip generation since I have that page open. The first step in the city's valuation process is to look at trip generation. The last appendix, the second to last page of that whole big book, is a traffic review memo. It has the trip generation for the existing use and the trip generation for the proposed use. So right now, the wholesale auto parts business that is on the site now, based on the IT, Institute of Transportation Engineers, trip generation rate for that use. The existing use generates 34 trips during the AM peak hour, 42 trips during the PM peak hour, and 455 trips a day. The 71 units proposed, residential units proposed, would generate 36 AM peak trips. So really, in maybe a trip or two more, and probably basically about the same in the morning, and it's the same in the afternoon. Maybe another couple trips, 44 trips for the 71 units versus 42 for the wholesale commercial use that's there now, and on a daily basis, 472 trips as opposed to 455. So on the base of that change in trip generation, city's traffic engineer said no further analysis was needed because it's essentially the same.
I noticed those numbers. My question is, this trip generation only pertains to project specific, this particular project. It does not address anything in the, across, the parking generated across the street, for example. The reason I'm questioning it, there are a few projects we recently approved, and they didn't have to go through an environmental or negative declaration. And there are, I think, 6 units or a few more units there. Let me put it this way, there's a few more units coming into that street. So how does that affect the overall impact on this street?
The way the city evaluates projects, they are looking at the impact of the project, and then if it's over that threshold you mentioned earlier in terms of additional trips, up near 50 peak hour trips, city's thresholds and guidelines, I'll say, will also contribute to cumulative effect. That's when a traffic study is required that also looks at the traffic generated by other projects in the area that could add up. When it's essentially no net change in trips, the city's guidelines don't require any further analysis because this won't really contribute to any cumulative effects along with other projects in the area.
Does the existing building have, the existing structure, did it have parking and had enough to impact, to
It's Mr. Chachi can speak more, but it's a wholesale auto parts business now, so there's trips for delivery all day long, and they don't have, I believe, as many, customers. So the parking that's there for Mr. Chachi's employees is adequate, and primarily they're doing deliveries and pickups.
So with that limited parking, it's generating 455 trips, and okay.
And there's really the difference there is that's kind of trips are spread throughout the day where traffic analysis is focused on that morning peak hour, and we're all going to work, and the evening when we're all trying to get home.
So no additional measures are necessary in this particular case.
Then to your question, Mr. Chairman, about the alternatives, what the California Environmental Quality Act requires is that if an ER is prepared, any ER, there has to be analysis of alternatives. And the purpose of that analysis is to provide additional information on how any impacts identified as significant could be avoided or substantially lessened. So the idea is just to provide more information. When a project as small as this, when you don't have any project-specific significant impacts, it's contributing to cumulative effects on the city's public services that are long-term, those sorts of things. You don't have as many factors that define your alternatives. So working with city staff, a range of alternatives was defined. The other thing the California Environmental Quality Act requires is you do comparative analysis of the impacts, and then one be selected as the environmentally superior alternative for purposes of the information in the EIR. Normally, for projects that have a lot of impacts, significant impacts to project level, that would be the alternative that avoids or substantially lessens the most significant impacts. For this project, given the size of the site and the size of the project and the range of alternatives, we're talking about very small differences, but the law does require that one alternative be identified superior. So the alternative that's a little smaller and would have some reduction in impacts is identified as that for that reason.
Which is alternative 2, 50% reduction in density. Okay. And my last question, I asked staff earlier, but I don't know if the studies you've done on the summer solstice and the winter solstice, I'm concerned about the courtyard. I know it's something that may be a design issue. I know your consideration is given to the adjacent buildings, but you happen to show these shadows and shades on the building. Is this pretty much accurate information?
Yes, it is. And it's real similar to, I was looking at some of the other EIRs we've worked on for the city over the past 2 years for similar scale projects, and even the ISIS project next door, and looking at where they're podium pool deck is. When you get projects that are 3, 4, 5 stories in height and the solar orientation in Glendale with your east-west and north-south street system, pretty common shape pattern. Most of the other projects approved have been in the same situation, where during the winter when the shadows are long for a couple hours, during the day you're shading your own open space, but doesn't affect any solar-sensitive offsite uses.
I'm just looking at the desirability of this courtyard because I'm looking at this in December. There's no sun coming into this courtyard.
Yeah, it's true. And that's during those hours of the day. And that's when the shadows are longest on December 21st. And that, 60 days around there, that's pretty common.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I close the public hearing? Okay, public hearing is closed and we'll discuss it. I'll start with you, Mr. Martin.
Yeah. So, it's a change since 2007, and I remember the other project fairly well, and I think it does follow, and it's kind of saddened to hear that it's taking you this long to get here, and it is kind of unfortunate to go through so many different design ideas and result in the project. I think overall, as Mr. Khan mentioned, the existing the so-called the ISIS or Brio project was built, and I think it allowed this to be more in context with what we have right now, what we're dealing with. As far as the design itself, it seems like a lot of years have gone through this to get to this point. So I'm not going to get into the overall design of this project. And I did go through the environmental, and it was pretty long read and pretty tough to understand most of the stuff. But the majority of the visual studies and the diagrams that it was given, it was really helpful. And one of the things that I've looked at is the shadowing, which it's kind of rare to have that. We have to use our imagination when we get such projects, and we kind of use that as a basis of determining some of these shadows and some of the courtyards and the design that is being developed, and obviously the added floor. So it, to me, based on my limited understanding of what I'm looking at, I think the impact of the shadow, and I think we touched upon that, it's unfortunate that it's casting shadow. Majority of the building is casting shadow over the commercial, but it is what it is. I prefer to have the 5-story on the north side, which it is, rather than on the south side, which I think it definitely does help the project. And I'm glad that the shadowing is provided so that, as it was mentioned in the December 21st solstice is the time that it's going to get mostly in the shadow, and at that time generally it's winter and it's cold supposedly in Southern California, and in the summer where you want to use it and it's under the sun. So which is, I think it does the job for addressing some of the openness and the height of the building that it casts shadow. Overall, I think in the past what we've done is we've looked at some of the sun impact into the units itself, but being that these units that are facing south are the only windows, and I understand, and I don't know if it was a result of the design review process that they went through with staff, or was it because of their decision of making these windows elongated and larger than what they are. So it kind of gives an interesting scale to the facade, and the simple facade that it's creating, it allows more light to come in. So being that it is limited window that it's, I'm kind of reluctant to put in a canopy or some sort of a canopy that will cast a shadow. So I think in this case, being that it is limited. So other than that, I think Overall, I think they've addressed. I mean, after so many years, I think they addressed most of these issues. And I think I'd like to touch upon a little bit about the landscaping, and we talked about it a bit. The landscape, I like to have them against the windows and doors, if possible, and I would, Ms. Palmer, to address that. And then if we can move some of the landscaping. It's basically a combination of what we have right now, what was presented. It's a combination of those two, and possibly putting the larger trees out away from the building to let it grow, and then the other landscape areas. And we do have landscaping against the egress windows on the ground floor, so that may become an issue, that you're limited to the height. So that may actually limit the size of the trees that are, or the planting that it's there. But overall, I think it's done well, and I think a lot of detailed information is given. So a lot of my questions were answered with the packet that was given.
Okay.
So,
thank you very much, Mr. Ligon. Ms. Palmer?
I agree with your comments. I just have a few more. Since I still can't find the bike racks, I mean, I think we need to address that. The courtyard, I think there's too much shade, and they've added that last story on there, so it creates shade more than I would like to see. But in general, I think the layout of the building looks good. The exteriors look good. The south elevation, some of those windows are going to get a lot of sun, and they're in bedrooms. They're tall windows. So if there was a way to put a little more shade, especially on the top floor there. And on the landscape, you are going to need to have taller planters for the trees, and I think suggesting putting the trees, if you can configure the walkway so the trees go to the outside, and that way they won't conflict with the bottom of the windows, and then keep the planters. I agree with you regarding planters against the building itself, and then maybe pop the trees out. And I would change on the corners. You've suggested putting in the oak trees, and I don't think that's going to be something that's going to go with this architecture, as well as a wide-spreading tree in a small area. It's not going to work. So I think just adjusting the tree boxes, making them taller, and the planters put against the building. And I think that's the comments I have. In general, I think it's a good job. I like the colors, detailing.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer. I concur with my colleagues. I do support the project. I think it's well done. Although my, comments on the EIR are pertaining to, traffic, but I'm satisfied with the 3-foot or whatever the dedication with the street alignment. But one thing, again, I'll mention that I don't think masonite should be used in this case. Maybe a hardy board. And I do agree with Ms. Palmer. Maybe a few more shading devices could occur on the south side. I think it was the south side, was it? And I'll let that, be worked out with staff. The other thing, I really thought maybe this street will be better if you have these units enter from them, from the front units. I don't know if that's something possible. Yeah, Ms. Saroyan, can I ask you a question? Can you explore the can you explore the possibilities of having these units that you are facing Elk enter from there? Is it because I think your deck is pretty much, there's not much difference in elevation.
On the westerly side, on the west corner, couple of units, we have couple of steps. One of them might be only 2. We don't have one, either 2 or 3 steps.
And they're both 3.
Yeah. They're both 3, okay.
The 2 on this side are...
Okay. One question I have here. You have all these water heaters in the front. Are these going to be with the flue going all the way to the roof, or are you just going to pop them out from the side?
It's not through the roof.
It's going to come out from sides?
From the side, yes.
Yeah, because we don't want to see all the...
No. It's a direct print from the side.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Saroyan. That's all. I'm sorry, one more question. Is there any street trees proposed on the sidewalk? Because otherwise, we don't have really a mature tree that's in ground, per se,
We haven't gone through the plan check. We haven't gone anything from engineering department, whether it will be required or not. But as we submit the plans for a plan check, if there is anything at the time when the street improvement permits or plans are prepared, that will be addressed there.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to do it because I think next door has a...
Make that recommendation.
Yeah, we can do that, okay.
But I think, how does that going to work with the 3-foot
No, but I'm talking in the sidewalk, in the sidewalk.
They said that they were going to widen the street.
It's only 3 feet, but still they did it over there.
Okay.
Just to answer your question, Chairman Martin, new street trees will be required
Will
for
be
the urban
required.
forestry, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Saroyan.
And also before you take a vote on this project, I neglected to mention that there's a change in the base color of the building. In the packet that was provided to you, the applicant proposed to use Spanish peanut by Dunn Edwards, and the applicant is proposing to change it to what's the Audubon Russet by Benjamin Moore instead.
How about if we leave it up to because
Yeah,
It's very similar, but staff believes that
it's a shade difference.
Yes,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I wouldn't. I want to make a big thing. Just
let the architect pick whichever shade they want. So I think I'm fine.
okay. So, should we discuss the EIR first, or?
How do we do?
Actually, before you can do anything with the project, you have to certify the EIR and adopt the statement of overrides first.
Is there one or two? I believe there was two.
I think it's done as one resolution that
one
would
resolution
satisfy the certification and the statement of overrides, the findings.
So I'll move to approve the EIR as submitted.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
so. There was a motion by Mr. Malakian to certify the final EIR, and a second by Ms. Palmer. Roll call to certify the EIR. Mr. Martin. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Malakian,
Yes.
Ms. Palmer,
Yes.
and Chairman Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And
Make a motion on the design.
design, and I'll move.
Can we
We just wanna
read
hear
the
the
conditions first? Do we have any conditions?
I think we have a couple of conditions.
Chris Agardi will cover the conditions for this.
The conditions that I have here are on the landscaping, have the landscape against the windows and door with larger trees away from the building and windows. Bike rack locations need to be identified. There was something, I don't have the revised landscape plan, but you mentioned something that the oak tree was not appropriate for the architectural character.
It's just going to be too large for that area, so just change that tree.
Okay, change that tree. At the corners, the tree boxes need to be taller,
All
approximately.
the tree boxes.
All tree boxes,
6 inches.
about 6 inches taller, the box size.
But they're allowed to step down as needed for the egress for the room. If they're gonna.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they have to work with the fire department on that. Yeah.
Okay. Masonite is not an appropriate or durable material for the siding, and they need to specify a better material. Consider two considerations: more shading devices on the south elevation, and consideration for true entries at the street level along Elk.
I think that's it.
Okay.
So
And that the awnings were considerations rather than a condition?
Right. Consideration. So
And I also heard making the planters where trees are to be planted deeper.
Yeah, we got
We
that.
Got that?
yeah, we got that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Take a
then
motion, please.
I'll move to approve the project with conditions and considerations.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Okay, there was some Motion by Mr. Malekin to approve the project with conditions and consideration, and a second by Ms. Palmer. This will be roll call. Mr. Malekin,
Yes.
Ms. Palmer,
Yes.
and Chairman Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes to approve the project with
Let the 8-year journey end today. Go to Disneyland.
Thank you very much.
All right, come on.
Do we need to sign? Is this something that we need to sign?
Yeah.
Environmental?
So whoever made the motion should sign it as a test at the bottom. There's two.
Oh, okay, so,
So I have to sign it?
yes.
Ready to go, or you need a break?
Continue on or have a break?
Would you like? Let's go.
Only been an hour.
Let's move on. Let's move on.
We're okay.
Yeah, let's go on. Yeah.
We've been going for a couple more hours.
Moving on. The next and last case on tonight's agenda is case number PDR 1429829. The project address is 129 through 133 West Los Feliz Road, and the applicant and owner are Armin Tatavosian. This is a first-time submittal for final review. I should say that the project plans are here and the prospective drawings as well as requested. The project is a 3-story medical office building to be constructed on a vacant 17,650 square foot lot zoned C3 Height District 1. The 3-story medical office building includes a 435 square foot pharmacy on the ground floor and approximately 2,400 square feet of medical office use on the upper 2 floors. A total of 65 on-site parking spaces are provided both at the ground level and in one level of subterranean garage below. The existing property, as you see in the aerial image on the TV screen coming up shortly, and also on the site plan, is a 100-foot wide by 176.5 foot deep vacant lot that was last developed with 2 single-family homes that have been since demolished. The property is located on the north side of Los Feliz Road, north of the Glendale Memorial Hospital. The site abuts to the rear, medium density R1650 zone. The adjacent properties to the north include a surface parking lot and driveway serving a 2-story apartment building with tuck-under parking on the ground floor and a 1-story detached residential unit behind a 1-story triplex building. The adjacent properties to the east include a 2-level shopping center, small complex, and then to the west is a surface parking lot for the hospital to the south. Both of these adjacent properties are zone C3. The staff prepared an initial study and a mitigated negative declaration that was circulated for the required 20-day review period from May 6th through May 25th. The project also included an administrative exception that was approved on May 26th to allow for a 3-foot reduction or a 13% deviation from code for the required 23-foot minimum rear setback. And again, this would be the setback at the rear facing the residential units. Prior to approval of the parking, of the administrative exception, that is, the planning hearing officer adopted the mitigated negative declaration. That mitigated negative declaration was included as part of your staff report, but this is only solely for your consideration as part of the project. This detailed staff report was broken into 3 sections, the first being the site planning. Again, as noted, the subject property is 100 feet wide, fronting Los Feliz Road, directly across from the Glendale Memorial Hospital. The proposed medical office building essentially spans the entire rectangular site. The 3-story building's main entrance is located on the westerly side portion. There's a 2-way driveway leading to the 65-space parking garage to the east. The the parking is essentially somewhat blocked by the building, and so it is consistent with the design guidelines of being sort of away from the front property line. There is a substantial transformer room that's located, you'll notice here, directly abutting the street, as required by GWP for accessibility. And there is also the potential emergency generator in the back northeast corner as well. The front property, and there were some issues with regards to a required easement. The property has a curb face to property line of only 7 feet, and there's a requirement to provide a 10-foot public right-of-way. So the building itself is set back an additional 3 feet from the property line in order to provide that 10-foot public access easement. There are also power poles, as you'll notice, on the street elevation and also in the street section aerial, which had to be addressed in terms of the required GWP clearances. So the building has been brought away from the front property line. To the rear, you'll notice that the building is obviously pushed back 20 feet, so the rear access parking is open to the sky. There is a provided landscape buffer as required by code with shade trees 20 feet on center to give some screening and some buffering between the proposed medical office use and the residential uses and units to the north. The proposed landscaping is complementary to the contemporary style of the building. Plans proposed for the site include a variety of drought-tolerant trees and primarily a mixture of grasses, and so there was a staff suggestion that the variety of shrubs and ground cover other than grasses be proposed. Also noted on the site plan, they are using decorative pavers for the driveway and for the walkways leading to the building. And essentially the proposed medical office building fits appropriately on its site and within its neighborhood context. The second item under discussion was the mass and scale. The proposed building, again, is 3 stories. Maximum height in a C3 zone is 50 feet. They are proposing pretty much 43 feet to the parapet, top of the parapet, and 46 feet overall with the maximum screening projections. So it is under code limits. The building is also, it's interesting to note that the building, in order to provide vision glass on the interior property lines, the building is actually set back an additional 10 feet along the interior property lines. This would be along the westerly and easterly exterior elevations. So the upper floors are actually pulled back 10 feet from the property lines as opposed to going all the way out to the property lines in order to provide the vision glass for the medical office use. So there's not only a setback at the front because of the power pole clearances required and the required public access easement, but then also from the interior property lines as well as the required 20, in this case, the approved 20-foot step back at the rear. So in terms of mass and scale, it really fits within its context because to the south you have the even taller Glendale Memorial Hospital, and then there's that transition of 3 stories, and then to the rear transition going to the 2-story multifamily residential. And last but not least, in terms of building design and detailing, as you see in for the perspective drawings and the elevation, it's a very contemporary building. The south elevation features a curtain wall with a varied grid pattern accented with random horizontal louvers. And again, I should say that this type of pattern runs throughout all 4 elevations. Then there, within the front elevation, you'll notice that the entryway is marked by an additional frame type element as well to promote a sense of arrival to the front. The windows are all commercial storefront window systems. There are both in terms of, and I want to, excuse me, if you don't mind, I'm going to give you the material board as well. So the building has these. They're all separate, so you could pass this around. There's Kingspan metal siding. There is smooth La Habra stucco and a Santa Barbara finish, a very smooth finish. Curtain wall frames and fins. metal frame storefront window and door systems, decorative split face block along the rear, and that is a code requirement. When you have a commercial property abutting a residential use, you have to have a decorative, a minimum 5.5 foot high block wall along the rear, and again, the decorative charcoal gray concrete pavers. The design and detailing, of the contemporary project, it definitely provides a cohesive architectural vocabulary, and it's expressed throughout the entire project. And the finishes and materials are used to reinforce the streamlined contemporary architectural style of the building. So that concludes staff's brief presentation. We do recommend approval. There were 2 minor incidental conditions. One was, again, with regards to the shrubs and ground cover, that it have less emphasis on the grass species while still being drought tolerant and compatible with the architectural style. And the last item was to have the applicant provide a lighting plan to be submitted to staff for review in order to make sure that it complements the contemporary design of the project.
Is there any signage on this?
At this point in time, there is no signage. This is something actually that we discussed with the applicant. The issue being, it is at this point in time proposed as a medical office building. We do not know at this point whether there is going to be 1, 2, or how many tenants within the medical office building, whether it is going to be one primary medical office tenant space or not. The issue with signage being that because the uses are on the 2nd floor and on the 3rd floor, the 2nd floor tenants are allowed by code to have signage. The 3rd floor tenants, unfortunately, are not at this point in time. So if there might be an issue, we will cross that bridge when we get to it if any sign variances are required. But at this point in time, they are not providing any signage other than the building number, and possibly a signage on the ground floor.
The reason I ask, we've seen some buildings where they put it on the windows, and it's
detracts, yes.
Yes, detracts.
We still have to consider some location for the signage that's going to take place. I'm assuming some signage is going to come in.
At this point in time,
How do we deal with it later on? Where do you put the sign?
That has been considered by the architect, and we have discussed this. Now,
it doesn't come back to us.
It does not come back to you. It does not. If there are multiple tenants, then yes, it does come back, because then a sign program is required. Not come back to you, but it comes back as a sign program to be reviewed by the director.
And if it were a single tenant, that's the type of thing we would handle at staff level. If you had recommendations as you're looking at the project or wanted to discuss with the architect, you could kind of let us know, but we don't have to decide that tonight.
So, sorry.
I was going to ask Vilya. Go ahead, Mr.
Is there any wall or along the sides? You've got the block wall in the back. Is there anything?
Yes, they are. They're actually all of the perimeter walls along the 2 interior. Well, essentially the 3 interior walls are all the split face.
Okay.
So there's a 4-foot grade change from the front to the back. So those are all
right.
There are a lot of areas here that are designated as landscape drawings, and I'm looking at them, and it's just a lot of ground cover. Is there any landscape requirements for this site as far as providing some landscaping or anything, or is it just that ground cover deals with like trees and other shading, because it's all glass? Was there any requirement by planning that
there is no
so essentially a ground cover is considered landscaping?
It's not a ground cover. If the grasses they provided get 3 feet tall.
Well, okay, I should be clear. Like any trees that it's required as far as shadows and shade and other things.
Are you talking in the front or in the back?
In the front and the side and other things.
No.
There is.
In a C3 zone, landscaping is not required for site development. Okay. However, when you have open parking lots, such as the portions that are open along the north and along the east, that are open to the sky, 5% of that open parking area has to be landscaped. So they are providing that just over 300 square foot landscape buffer along the rear as part of their required landscaping for the parking lot. The landscaping also...
The entire parking lot on the ground level.
It's not the entire parking. It's only that portion that is open to the sky.
I see.
Okay? So there's a distinction. The portion that is not open to the sky does not have to have the 5%
What about the
minimum
east
landscape.
side?
Same thing.
The east side, and that's what I'm including, the east side and the north side.
Oh, so east and north is all covered along the north.
Right, and
It's
they've chosen
correct.
to put their required trees all along the north, which is more appropriate because of the interface there.
Which is a question that I was going to, it was a different question. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. When you, like you said, interior parameter parkings have to be landscaped, 5%. And the parameter landscaping does not count part of the calculation of the 5%. Because if that's the case, that rear landscaping that you're saying goes towards the 5% of the open parking doesn't work.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating your question?
It's in the,
I'm
it's
not
in the
following.
landscaping zoning section, landscaping of parking. When you have when it's you said 5% is required to have landscape
Of the area that's open to the sky.
Of the open area. Now, his question: where do you locate that? You're saying it's all located in the back.
No. There's landscape along the east edge also, but there are no trees along the east edge.
It's the decorative. It says decorative angels.
pavers.
There's no landscaping on neither
There's no
side.
landscaping.
The only landscaping I see is in the rear.
Yeah, the front.
And the front is not even, it's just above the deck again. If you look at that parking landscaping section, you'll see it, that excludes that the rear should be counted towards 5% parameter parking.
I'm actually going to go find that code section specifically.
But before,
and
because
return.
I may need you to look at something else, if I'm, Mrs. Anatitis, I'm looking at the garage plan. Normally, based on my experience and what I know about the code, all these column recesses with an 8'6" stall should be no more than 4 feet. Is that true? Then I'm looking at the garage plan. I have 6'4", 4.5 feet. Then same thing happens on the lower parking garage. I'm assuming they're trying to line up the columns, but it won't work. If you look at our parking chart, it's 4 feet. And that's my question on it. I hope my colleague concurs and understand what I'm talking about.
No, I understand. I see your point.
And what's happening in the rear again? Because they have shoring, they've stepped it back 2, 3, that 4 feet, then they come to the planter. That shoring is remaining, so that landscaping is only 3 feet in the back.
And you're referring to the landscape buffer?
Yeah, the landscape buffer. See, if you look at the elevation order sections, there's a break in the grade, that 4 feet difference in the back. Then they have a fence on top of it. But you can research that.
Yes. I will definitely get that code section for you.
Any other questions, Mr. Mullican, Ms. Palmer?
I'll wait for the architect.
Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing. I'll go with the designer, Mr. Andrew Cartwright. That's a famous name, Cartwright. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman and board members and staff. I'm Andrew Cartwright with SWA Architects at 48 East Holly Street in Pasadena. I'm here to answer any question you have. Viala did a great job actually explaining our project. Actually, to kind of go straight at, there are 2 questions. The landscape. As far as my understanding and discussing with Viala about our required landscaping, the only required landscaping that we have to have is for the exposed parking.
Okay.
No other landscaping is required for the site, and that's 5% of the exposed parking area, and we're providing that in the rear, that required amount. So any additional landscaping we have is we're just doing above and beyond that. We do have a small portion of ground cover in the front, but we decided not to put trees in front because we have 2 street trees on a 100-foot lot.
You could still have some not so.
Then the 4-foot about the columns, the actual list says it's a 4-foot minimum, not a 4-foot max.
I believe it's 4-foot max. All right. Mr. Mulligan, you've done work in this. It's 4-foot max, right? But since you're up here, Mr. Carter, is there no security on this building? You have no gate on the driveway. The side is open, so the parking is all open?
It's all open.
So there's no security. And as he mentioned, there's no trees in the front. Now, can you elaborate on the metal panel, the joints in the metal panel? The vertical and horizontal joints?
Reglets you're talking about?
Not the reglets, but
No, the joints that...
I actually have a sample if you would like to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to see what's that, the rubber or the indentation, the score line. Yeah, tongue groove. Okay, so we're going to see the full score there.
Yes.
Okay, no, all right. Okay, that's great. Okay. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you in regards to the material details and so on and so forth. So the first question that I have is, and pretty much most of the questions are going to be evolving around the storefront cladding and how you treated them and so on and so forth. And I'll start with the south elevation. Okay. So if you look at your first floor plan, is it true, and do I understand it correctly, that you have a stairs facing Los Feliz?
Yes.
And the way that you've indicated on your plan, around that stair, you're going to have a 2-hour wall.
The 2-hour wall would only have to actually protect the sides adjoining the building. The front can be exposed.
Okay. So the way that it's indicated on the plan, you're not going to have a 2-hour.
No.
And I'm trying to imagine this building, not in the morning, because I'm assuming that you're going to have enough shading that would kind of control a lot of the movements and other elements that behind the glass, or is it going to be clear? I mean, are you going to see through this? Do you have a sample of the glass?
Yes.
Okay.
He's using tinted glass.
Board Member Malikian, you're asking specifically about the glass just at the first floor level?
Right now I'm concentrating along the south.
On the west side, abutting the stair?
We have light green and or dark green.
Okay. All right. Perfect. This helps me a lot. So on this, so the shading that, or the rendering that you have, that is fairly opaque, it's actually transparent.
Yes.
Okay. So on the west end of your facade, you're going to see the stairs behind the glass, correct?
On Los Feliz, you would see.
So this behind
going up, yes.
Behind this glass, it's all stairs. So you have the railing and you have all the elements of the structure that is going to be apparent behind this glass, correct? Then you come across and you come to this point, which is here. And that's going to be solid behind it because you have the elevator.
But the elevator is stepped back.
I understand. But I'm trying to understand this during the day, and I'm using my imagination during the night.
Yes.
Because during the night, you're going to lit this building, and what it's going to happen is behind this section, it's going to be dark. Correct?
Yes.
So you're going to have a lit section here. This is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be lit. It's an exit stairs. I don't know if it's going to be used. So at night, you have different characteristics of this rendering that we're looking at. So you're going to have these transparent and translucent kind of volumes, correct?
Yeah, and there are spandrel panels, and like Biel said, we're going to want to do a lighting plan to see how the lighting is actually going to work. And that was one of the initial discussions of seeing how the lighting was going to work along that front facade to make sure it wasn't.
So carrying that same conversation, how do we, so being that 60% or if not 80% of the building is transparent, right? It's all glass. So I'm assuming that hopefully it'll be occupied, structures are going to be built inside to devise the units and so on and so forth. How's that going to impact the appearance? Or are you going to have some sort of a controlling system so that it would follow certain grid lines? Or is it randomly they're going to put the walls in, build, I don't know, their private rooms and stuff, and that's going to...
At this point, we would determine that all the walls would have to line up with the vertical mullions. As far as how often they're spaced, that's going to be purely a tenant thing. We can't control how big, because if one tenant takes up the entire space or 3 tenants take up the one space, it's hard to control that because they lease the amount of space. Now, the lighting control would be definitely controlled in the front lobby area, the main mass in front. That would be controlled and that would be unified. But as far as the front and the sides and the rear...
I just don't want... I want the system that you've created to be followed when the tenants are coming in. I mean, if they are allowed... I don't want them to create their own mullions and their own demising points. That's what I'm trying to get at. I don't want these walls to appear at some points and these lines are going to be all over the place.
Yes, I mean, we would make that part of the design criteria.
You need to control that, I think he's right.
So the second the relevant question in regards to these, the dominant detail that you're carrying throughout is these louvers, correct? So the rendering or the elevations that are drawn is a little bit different than what I'm seeing here, the fins that you have. So the question that I have is, are they going to be square or profile that you're showing, or is it going to be similar to more of a thinner fin or like a airplane wing kind of projecting out?
The original intent is for it to be square. Currently, Acadia only had that style as a profile to show you a detail of how it's similar is going to work. But the intent was to provide a square because the building is square.
So is this going to be used only for aesthetic, or is it going to be used primarily for shadow and so if it is shadow, has there been a shadow study to determine the? So have you determined the depth of or the width or the?
No, we haven't determined it based upon a shade and shadow. Right now, it's just an aesthetic determination.
So what is this dimension? What is this? Is it what you're showing on the section? Is just this little?
Yes, on basically the minor horizontals, they're only sticking out 6 inches.
So we can actually take this and move it anywhere we want, and it's not going to impact any of the...
And essentially the large horizontal bands are sticking out, I think, approximately 1 foot 2 inches. I think that's about how far they stick out.
2 inches or?
1 foot 2.
And how are the... being that, again, it's facing east, west, and south, majority of it's all glass, how is that going to be controlled? Is this going to have enough
We have done
control?
a full Title 24 energy calculations, and currently the low E glass, along with all the mechanical systems, are currently controlling the building to be code compliant.
So they're not going to come back and start hanging blinds or anything?
Tenants are allowed to put in blinds if they want.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mulligan. Ms. Palmer?
I just have two different type of questions. I noticed the trash area appears to be on the drive into the garage. And I'm assuming that's fairly steep. And is the access right on the driveway? It looks
No,
like it opens up into the driveway.
We would have a curb cut, and then we would have that 10-foot sidewalk that would be basically our drive up, and then it's going to be flat. Just slope the deck for drainage.
I'm talking about for the trash access.
No, the trash enclosure is past the 10-foot setback for the sidewalk.
It's more or less at grade, though.
It's at grade. There's no slope.
Oh, there's no slope, okay.
There's no slope.
Well, I guess the other question I have is, if you access it into the driveway and somebody's taking the trash out, somebody can't access the garage while that's going on, correct?
Correct.
So that could be a problem.
Trash is typically picked up really quickly and eliminated.
You know, those drivers don't want to wait. I'm just bringing it up.
True.
Anyway, the other question I have is, and I don't know if this can be done, I go along this street all times during the day and even early in the weekend morning, and the parking lot where the hospital has, the residents won't, or the people parking there will not go to the crosswalk. So they cross right there, and you're going to have more people from this medical building going back and forth to the hospital. Is there a possibility of suggesting a crosswalk in that area? Because right now it's just haphazard, and it's got to be increased.
We can actually speak with traffic and transportation and public works individuals. It really depends on the distance between the two adjacent. There's the cross street on Orange and then Los Feliz Boulevard, whether or not even they would be able to put in some sort of crosswalk, but we can double check with them.
Yeah, we won't add that to
We
the
can't really
staff
condition
conditions.
that. We can't really add that as a
we can certainly
condition.
ask transportation. Yeah.
hazard.
No, it makes sense looking at it.
So,
I still have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Mulligan.
The talking about the vault in the front, and it seems like it's a requirement by the Water and Power, and so that structure cannot be on grade, or you can't access it. It has to have that structure there, and the height of that is dictated by Water and Power. Is that what it is?
Total height of the structure was done for aesthetic reasons. We actually could go much shorter. We're only required 8-foot high ceiling height inside of it. So we actually increased the height to be more in tune with the massing of the building.
Okay. And two other quick questions. You have a generator enclosure in the back?
It's just an enclosure. It's for future potential use for emergency generator.
And would you need an access to that, or you don't need an access to that?
No, they would crane the generator in, and then there would be a remote fueling up front.
Okay,
can't
and
fuel
so
in the back.
because you're showing a pair of doors, but there's no access to those doors. I mean, there's
Just purely man access for simple maintenance,
I
but
see.
not equipment.
I see. Okay. And then I had one more. Okay. So I understand the 10-foot setback because of the openings and building and safety and all that. Would you object to create some, the detail between this plaster and the window? Is there a reason that you flushed this whole thing out and not really accentuating this volume that it's creating around these openings and just being flush? It just
Yeah, I have no
I think
problem with accentuating the window.
it's actually it makes this design a lot more serious than it's just a facade. And one last question. You said Arcadia fins or the louvers, right? Now, if they're attached to the mullions, how is the same detail carried over the plaster? How's that going to be?
Same. Can you?
Yeah, those are at the corners where it wraps around?
So if these are all strictly attached to the mullions, how are they continuing attaching to the? Is it something that it's going to change, or is it something that it's a different detail, or is it going to be?
I haven't actually gone that far with the detailing of those fins. Our intent was that there would be some kind of structural beam that would have to carry that anyways. So it'd be a secondary structural member that we would attach to, and then the stucco would just, it'd be a similar detail. That would be the essential. There'd be a structural beam that would carry across all the fins we'd attach to it, and then we'd have a relief at the top and bottom of each one of the fins for the stucco to die in.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mulligan. Ms. Palmer? I had a question back to those openings. I understand it's BS occupancy, and you're limited at the openings, but then there's a exemption. It says, if you're more than 10 feet, no limit. But it still has to be protected. There's, the protection, okay, the building is sprinklered, but are the protections of opening, do you have any sprinklers coming out of the building to protect this opening, or that's also eliminated by the building code?
That's eliminated.
Because I know it has changed recently.
Yeah, it's a Type 2B
right.
building, so all the protection we do not have to have past the 10 foot.
So there's just it's sprinklered, but no protection is required. Yep. Okay, because I don't want to see these things sticking out of the building and like the old days. The other question I had. Why couldn't you locate the transformer room in the garage? Why does it have to be right up the street?
This was something that was dictated by the Glendale Water Power, that the size of the transformer.
Used to be in the garage.
We talked a lot about that transformer.
We actually had several meetings with them. And
underground, too, now.
Correct, but the size of the transformer, they wanted direct street access to the transformer.
Yeah, it was very clear that this was the only place it could go.
I know the
we tried every which way to locate. We tried to push it to the back towards the interior of the parking lot. It was
same thing with gas meters and all that stuff. But one other question: you show a single door, or is it a double door for that room? On the plan, it says double door. Is it a double door?
It's a double door on the elevation.
It's a double door.
Okay.
Because we could only have a 2-foot door, so we had to do two.
Because of the sidewalk, we couldn't have one door opening out onto the sidewalk.
Okay.
And projecting into the public right-of-way, so it had to be within the 3-foot.
Okay.
Exactly.
So what are we doing with that landscape, Ms. Mataitis?
Okay. The code
parking
sections.
columns, because that may affect.
Exactly. No. Thank you for bringing those up. I checked our code, and this is the parking columns are in compliance because it's a minimum 4-foot distance from the end of the column. It's not a maximum 4-foot. There is a minimum 2-foot wide.
That I know.
Column, and it's a minimum 4-foot distance from the end. So I'd be more than happy to show Chairman.
I saw the chart. I mean, the chart is clear. It says, but it doesn't talk about minimum or maximum.
It actually, when I show you the chart, I'd be more than happy to bring this up to you.
Don't worry about it.
And second of all, with regards to the landscaping, you are correct in terms of having the perimeter landscaping not counted towards the interior parking lot. However, this is a dual code issue because you are required to provide the landscaping against the rear property line with the 5-foot trees. And because of the perimeter of the parking lot is only open to the sky around the side, the landscaping has to be around the perimeter of that area. It's not the interior. The interior of the parking lot, the landscaping requirement is meant for what's open to the sky. So because you have the 5-foot trees and landscape buffer required between the commercial property and the residential, we will be able to go ahead and count a portion of that landscaping. The parking that's open to the sky is it's 25, so just over 2,000 square feet. 5% of that is just 100 square feet. The rear parking buffer is actually over 300 square feet, and so we're only counting 100 square feet, basically a third of that landscape buffer towards the rear. There is also ample landscaping provided at the front. So that is something that is above and beyond what the code requirements are.
Okay.
So for that reason, it is in compliance with our zoning code.
Thank you. I have another. Do you have any more questions, or does I have another speaker?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I have Stephen.
Stephen Wen.
Stephen Wen. Okay, Wen.
It's the minimum for.
It's okay, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, board members, staff, Stephen Wen, Principal, SW Architects. I wanted to share with you a few of the questions that make further clarification, a few of the questions that was asked earlier. The first item I wanted to address Mr. Malekian's question regarding the mullion and room of the interior offices. The exterior mullion that we have designed, those bay grid we set up, is in such manner that those are the modules to allow us to be able to accommodate medical office space distance, the common spaces. At this point, this is a sort of a multiple answer questions. At this point, we're not sure what the future tenant will be. We're not sure whether there will be multiple small practices or is going to be a large group practices. The owner right now is in the process of working with their commercial broker, their medical commercial broker, in talking to various different groups. There's also possibility that they may be talking to the hospital regarding a possible option for the hospital to consider putting any of their outpatient clinic facility in this building. So with that said, it is not certain at this point. So, but nevertheless, whether it's a large group practices or small medical groups that will be on the second and the third floor, what ultimately end up with is most of the medical office spaces are set up in the module spaces of usually 10 by 12, all right? Especially with the new OSHPA 3 regulation that's coming through these days, a lot of these spaces require a mandate to be at least 10 by 12 net internal space. So when we developed the exterior curtain wall concept, it is not only a design concept we're trying to accomplish to give that modern look, but also we took into consideration of the potential mullion in response to where the potential interior office partition. So we're sensitive to that. So we will do every possible means to line the wall into those mullion space. If we're a little off, there is a standard procedure detail we do that offsets it, adjusts it slightly, and there's a neoprene gasket with a aluminum extrusion gap piece allow us to be able to die into the existing mullion. So those are the typical detail that we try to do when we developed medical offices. Now, in terms of concern with Crosswalk Street, once again, it is our understanding that if they should be working with any medical group in this building, traditionally it is not a situation where the patient will need to cross the street to go to the hospital for any type of follow-up procedures. So at this point, once again, we're not certain we will be in that process. As we go beyond this point, we will be in conversation, in collaboration with the commercial broker hired by the developer to the owner of the building to see what are the type of medical practices that may be coming in. So those are all questions that we'll be very sensitive to. And I hear, Mr. Palmer, your question, your concern with the crosswalk, but usually if you look at this side of the Los Feliz, this is the first medical office building that is being proposed. Right across the street is the ED and the heart center. And chances of people crossing over is feeling is
They
very...
do it all the time. That's all the only reason I brought it up. So
Right.
It's just something to consider.
Sure. We will take that under advisement when we begin to work with the broker in those concerns. I want to address the eyelid, so-called eyelid. We call it an eyelid. The the horizontal elements, those are mainly decorative items. They're not intended. We work with Arcadia glass and their extrusion in various different projects. They have various different type of eyelets. Some eyelets that is developed in their manufacturing plants are literally sunshades, and they come in little fins. They probably stepped out 2-3 feet. They're in fin process. But this is what we call an eyelet. It's simply a decorative items. In this case,
So this is not what we're looking at.
this is what we're looking at, but it's in a different shape. Okay, the fin ones, it's a vertical fins. It's an eyelet that's, if you imagine, this is the portion that attached to the mullion. The other, the one with the sunshade purpose, has vertical fins in this way. So it almost looked like a trellis that extended out sideways. Right. But this is not those. So this is purely decorative. So what we're trying to do is break up the horizontal linear element and give it a little random, because or else this will be a big glass of flat monolithic curtain wall. So this really gives is what you have there. What is what we consider what we call a mosaic window glass system, where we use in different colors, accentuated by the eyelets to give it that irregular look and feel. And that's really the intent that we're trying to accomplish here.
So it's a solid piece. It's
yes,
a solid band that
yes,
goes around.
It's a solid. So going to the one of the question you raised with Andrew Cartwright in terms of the transition between curtain wall and the plaster wall. Yes, the detail will change because the curtain wall, this thing dies into, it's connected with the extrusion into the horizontal mullion of the curtain wall. But once we get to the plaster wall, there will be a transition. You will see a thin line, but the connectivity for the same eyelet to a plaster wall is a total different element. So there will be a transition in terms of support element, but it will be, quote unquote, almost seamless in the respect that from the distance of you simply see a thin line. So I think some of the other question was clarified by Vilia and Andrew, so I hope I kind of clarify a few of the questions in that respect.
I have no more questions. Any more questions?
I just want to make a final comment. It is a very tight site, as you know. It's a little piece of jewel in the respect that we try to make this building fit within this site in the context and at the same time produce a very competitive architectural motif that will match what's across at the heart center right at the hospital. So there are many elements that we're trying to design in such manner so it will fit within the context of the hospital corridor. So yes, a lot of the dimensions that you mentioned, these are we're counting by inches here and there, but so far I think with the exception of the rear yard setback adjustment everywhere, we believe we meet the code compliances that's required by the planning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. And any more questions or any, Ms. Palmer, you want to start?
Okay. I like the building and I like those horizontal fins, but I have the same concern as Mr. Malikian that once, even if you can control the wall issues, is where the walls go, all along those sides you're going to have whatever amenities are within the rooms. So you could have an entire 2 stories of tables, chairs, whatever, like having a glass balcony with bicycles on it. So that's a concern I have. And the comment I had was, lost it here. I agree with staff's comments regarding changing some of the planting in the rear. You've got some grasses. I don't object to that, but it's a very shady area and they're not going to be growing very well. So if you could get something that's a low ground cover, evergreen would be fine. And front, I know you're not required to have those, but the grasses themselves, many of these varieties get cut down during part of the year, so you just have stumps. So just make sure it's something that's going to be a grass all year, or put some evergreen like a boxwood hedge or something that might tie in with the building horizontality. And, oh, I know we discussed the signage, but now it appears that it may have numerous offices within that building, and I would not want to see any signage on the building or on the glass. That I don't know if a monument sign is allowed or would be able to be used in that area with setbacks and things.
Yes, a monument sign or an accessory ground sign would be permitted within the setback outside the required 10-foot sidewalk dedication area. So within that little landscape strip, they would be allowed to go ahead and provide an accessory ground sign. As I mentioned during my presentation, on the third floor, they would not be able to have any signage whatsoever. On the second floor, for those tenants facing either a parking lot or the street, and so again, you'd be limited to 2 elevations at this point in time. They would only be able to have the tenant that is directly adjacent to that sign area. So if there are multiple tenants, again, if there are multiple tenants, there is a code requirement that a sign program be submitted for review by the director. So
I would just recommend a monument sign that fit with the architecture. Okay. Keep it clean. So.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer. Ms. Wellington, any more thoughts?
Kind of asked all my questions, and I'm trying to gather my thoughts on this. First of all, it's a very minimal and very pleasant architecture, which I enjoy. One of the main characteristics of the building is the simple detailing and simple the materials that are being proposed and how they're coming together. Being that such a simple, minimal architecture, I think a lot of the details need to be addressed a little bit further. There are similar conditions that are being proposed, and different details and different conditions are being used to address similar situations. I'll explain. I'll go in further detail, and I'll be clear about what I'm talking about. Also, as I mentioned, I think you have layers of volumes that are kind of being overlapped on top of each other. I think emphasizing these layers on their own merit, I think that's positive, and I think to hopefully my suggestions will allow that to happen further. One of the things, first of all, I think there's a little bit of an error on the elevation on the west elevation. Right next to the volume that is being indicated as a pharmacy, there's a large wall that is flush with the building line, which I don't think it appears there. If I have the stick here.
And that wall is further beyond.
I don't think the wall doesn't even, I think this area is incorrect. I think there's a little shaft here that you have, which is about that high, but the building itself, the way it's shadowed in, I think that's incorrect as well. You have a substantial shadow between the column and the building itself. So this actually emphasizes the idea that I have that this volume should be on its own. I think as this volume is further out, I don't know if you want to do the same thing with this. I don't think this will really help having this volume being in line and level with the columns, because the above volume should stand on its own. As I believe the perimeter of these elements should be extruded further so that the glass line stays at 10 foot, but the stucco pulls out so that these are just volumes that are being placed on top. And if you want to consider this as one volume that are pushed from the side, maybe the north and the south are flush or something there, I think that will definitely emphasize this.
Could I just clarify? Hear you clarify. You're saying you want the window plane to be more.
No,
recessed.
window plane should stay where it is, but I think the stucco should come out.
Okay, you just want more recess.
Exactly. So at least minimum 6, possibly 12-inch to emphasize that volume. Now the other thing that it's interesting, which I would like that to be studied further, is once you pull these volumes out, I think these volumes should stand on its own, but then it should be consistent. So when what I'm talking about is that you have these different dimensions that are happening, parapet height, this section, and that. And then as you come around, you have different widths that are happening all around. I think the consistent dimension all around, I think that may help. And you are using spandrel glass or some sort of a glass system in front of the structure, so I think that can be introduced to possibly pull this up. Maybe that you have this dimension maybe on the top as well, so the glass kind of carries up above. And I don't know what that will do to the entire volume, if it's going to be out of proportion or not. That's something that I would suggest. The other thing that I'm really uneasy about is this large, solid, non-transparent wall on the glass. I actually did a project. I'll be very honest. I did a project about 20 years ago in Santa Monica, and the idea was that we would create these glass from the ground, and then it would create these arches to emphasize that it was an earthquake damage, so it fell down, and we wanted to replicate what was there before. So what we did was we created the storefront on the ground, and then we carried the storefront to carry the arch and the volume that it had. And what we did was we did the spandrel glass behind that. Well, at night, what happened was, it is very interesting. In the morning, it worked great because everything was in the same shadow and same glass, so you see the volume, everything was working out great. But when it came to the nighttime, the lid, it just became transparent at the bottom, but at the top, it's solid black. There's nothing there for it to, so it was just kind of a rectangular volume that was going across at night, but then in the morning it became this formation of this glass. So what I'm afraid of is that this is what's going to happen here. And I don't know what that means. Does that mean that we don't have that? Does that mean that another material gets introduced? Does it mean that we put light behind it? Does it mean that we remove the glass and only the mullions just carry over, and the glass is just, there's nothing there, and the wall behind it is the elevator and like a green wall possibly, or something, and different.
Looking at the floor plans, they did push the elevator back away from the curtain wall, so there is a space there that light will enter.
And that may be the case, and I don't know.
That's what they're showing on the drawings. So what I'm wondering is, and I know you were concerned that there's going to be the differential where the stairway is, there'll be light constantly at night.
Probably
if the concern is that there might not be enough light entering into this little nook, basically, perhaps an uplight washing on the south wall of the elevator enclosure, would that help?
So I don't know. I don't know what the impact is going to be. I can't visualize because I don't have the information on the light intensity.
So in terms of a condition, would you be satisfied if we had something to develop lighting method or other means to ensure that this vertical bay of glass
they do have the opportunity. They do have the opportunity to address it somehow or another. I mean, either with basically light the back of the glass, change the louvers to be vertical louvers and spaced in, and it's just no glass, and it's just the wall behind the elevator, or just remove the glass, let the aluminum mullions just carry just a transparent glass, and could be green wall, it can be anything. I mean, they have numerous different ways of addressing that, but I think
it could be opaque as well.
It can be opaque as well, but if it is opaque, then
it distracts the
Yeah, the goal was to have a large glazed area that was surrounded by the big frame of the building.
Right.
So what I'm hearing, I think, is you want a consistent appearance across the span of this
I think
entry.
that's what I'm more concerned about at night than in the morning.
Right.
In the morning, I think we don't.
That's why I'm
have it.
picturing it could be a lighting solution, an interior lighting
It may
solution.
be a lighting solution.
It
Okay,
could be
so
a lighting solution, or they could treat it as some sort of I don't mean to interrupt.
It could be,
Some
Yeah, I'll write a condition that's fairly broad, but with the goal of achieving a consistent lighting quality or translucency across that bay, the full width of that area.
So going back to this volume, I think another layer of thought needs to go in around this versus the proportion of this to this, and the thinness or the slenderness of these columns on the side versus the top hat, and how does that play into this volume? Could it be that part of this is coming down and this is eliminated as just an L shape, or is the glass maybe pulled out and then you have this volume, just the glass volume coming? It just, these two are too similar, but yet it's unproportioned. Also, the renderings again, it's showing up as some columns that do not appear, so that needs to be addressed. Also, these volumes that, going back to the conditions, that you have similar conditions, but you're addressing it different ways. This volume here is so-called a transformer vault, and we can go up to 8 feet, but it's taken up to the mullion height, which I appreciate that. I think you have a condition that the mullion is, or the storefront is being broken by this volume. And then at this corner, you're addressing the same kind of a volume with the plaster. And unfortunately, I don't know if you want to carry the same material as the volume or not, or is it because then you have these two materials coming together, and so there's details there that I think it needs to be a little bit more addressed. But being that it's a simple architecture, all these little things, I think it will definitely improve.
Okay. Done, Mr. Maliki?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Duke, are you any more questions? I do concur with my colleagues. I think the project direction is in the right direction. The design, I appreciate the design and the simplicity of it and the random location of these horizontal elements. I do concur with Mr. Malikian. I think he started with the side elevation and brought up the front elevation. I think some recess should occur on the windows, whether it's 6 inches. But I have it in my notes. My first concern, the proportions, as Mr. Malikian mentions, the vertical proportions of the fin or the walls are coming down. I think they need to be a little more substantial. Whether you follow Mr. Malikian's direction, eliminate or make an L or upside down L on the entry, or leave it alone and just beef up the little bit of the side, then it'll proportionally will work together well, in my opinion. But that's of course the rendering should be corrected, or they already know that the elevation should be corrected to show the columns being further back than what it should be. Other than that, I like the composition on the building. I think it's a nice addition to that neighborhood. The only concern that I had, which he brought it up, and I think he discussed it quite a bit, and also the applicant, how are you going to meet these walls with the store or with a curtain wall? I think that's addressed. I think you need to control the building. And you're right, I've done a lot of medical spaces where these modules are 10 by 10, 10 by 12. Then those needs to be controlled. We don't want to see this dry or walls, especially when this kind of exposure occurs. Other than that, I
want to add one or two little thoughts there as well, if I may.
But we need to be, Mr. Maliki, we need to be kind of giving the applicant direction as what we want to do.
Yes.
I mean, we both agreed on the recess of the
And that's what I want to talk about, because I think by pulling the facade out, I think you're going to have some issues with these fence and how they're going to be addressed as they go around. I want to propose the option of if you do end up following this, which I like, let that be a shading device. And at the same time, if this volume comes out, I'm okay with the shading devices staying within the window volume rather than wrapping around on the stucco. I think that on its own, it's creating some issues there, like these elements wrapping around. I think these fins just happening within the glass area, I'm okay with that. To be a lot more simpler, cleaner, and possibly using the same element randomly as you've done it, maybe at one location, possibly proposing a vertical one.
Maybe by doing that, recessing, keeping the fins in and they become shade fins, you're going to not see what's happening behind the glass.
You're going to see what's happening behind the glass.
I mean,
That's.
It might camouflage.
But I think by simplifying the concept, I'm afraid by the time they're done with attaching these to the storefront and then wrapping that around, and all those details may not actually look the way we're looking at this. So might as well simplify it enough that it will give them the opportunity to work with some of the available products rather than manufacturing and specifically custom made.
I do agree with you about these fins extending to the cores, that those could be eliminated, but I don't know if it's necessary to add vertical, because now we have such mass that this horizontality is breaking it, unless one random one.
That's just me. I would have put one in there or just to kind of change the color and possibly put a red one or something. But
you could still do that. I think.
I don't know. It's fun. It's fun. Just have fun with it. I think I like.
That volume is.
This being. Yeah, I think it definitely will simplify.
So let's read the conditions, or we have any conditions.
Just following up on the idea, I think this building was designed almost to the millimeter of what's going to work, so it may ultimately be the glass is going to be pushed back rather than the stucco is going to be furred out.
We
achieve the same goal.
If I understand it correctly, if I understand it correctly, the window, the opening is what is critical.
Mm-hmm.
The wall itself, if it's protected, obviously it's going to be protected wall, and that there's no openings in there, so that can actually project into the 10-foot setback. I believe. I'm fairly confident that, and I see the architect shaking the head.
Either way, Mr. Malikian, you're going to recess it this way or pull the bands out. Either way, it's.
I'm fine with that. I mean, they understand, and I think the idea is that
the goal is the most important thing. So
right.
Okay, so.
And these would be substantial enough again, so it doesn't have to be that 6-inch depth or the 12. It can actually project out of the face of the.
It should project at least 1.5 foot.
Yeah, right.
To give you a little more. I think it will add to the building much more. I think even on his sample that he's showing, they project out more than 1 foot 2, or they're about 2 feet projections. But
So you guys will do a study of, they'll submit some lighting study to you guys for you guys to study, right? Like at night, a rendering of a night study or something.
We weren't going to ask for that, and I'm not sure if we can achieve your goal of making sure there's consistent potential translucency of the glass facades.
But how would you know what it's going to, if they do
but it's in your conditions.
What's that?
It's in your condition. The lighting plan shall be.
No, that was just for light fixtures.
For the exterior.
Not for a light study. A light study is very expensive, and we wouldn't normally ask for that.
I don't think I would ask for a lighting study. I would probably ask for a light rendering of something similar to what they're going to be putting in, something to have as for you guys to be comfortable with, because I'm.
Ultimately, it's easier for us if we understand the goal that you want to achieve, which I think I do. we will work with them to make sure that happens, but the expense of a rendering or certainly a study.
I think some controlled
The rendering
lighting
would just
to
live in
give
a
it that
file as soon
appearance.
as the project, as soon as we approved it, so.
Okay.
Okay, so what do we have, Mr. Platt?
Going over, I'll just kind of go over these in order of appearance rather than importance. We'll make sure that the horizontal fins have the square profile we talked about rather than the one shown in the...
Wait a minute,
Well,
I
no.
thought he said
No,
he wants it like this.
The tapered?
The tapered one.
Or whatever they have.
I'm sorry, because
Because
earlier...
their intention is a band.
Right, and earlier I thought you said you wanted square profile.
He was just saying he also liked to have.
No,
it
I mean,
fit.
what they're submitting, I mean, the square, this is what they submitted.
Yeah, but that's
Right,
not
but
what's
they
in the
said in
drawing.
their presentation the intention was for it to have a square profile. That's what I've heard. If you want
If
the
they
tapered
can do that,
fin,
that's fine.
you know,
If they can do that, that's fine. I mean, it's up to them. And
I'm just-
I'm fine with, as long as it's the projection. I think a thinner would look better in a sense that rather than you can combine it with, the
It's
square.
a personal thing, the band here gives us some horizontal proportional,
Right.
But making it too thin, it might just
Right.
disappear.
So I'll let them.
Okay,
pick.
so,
Yeah,
so we won't have a
that's
condition
fine.
about that. We'll
Yeah.
just work out
Right.
what
But
they want.
the projection, we should also, the
Yeah, if you want projection minimum 18 inches is what I
18
heard.
inches,
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I have.
That's
we're-
what they said, right?
18 inches?
I'm looking at the applicant and the architect, and that's,
That won't
I don't
happen?
That's what I
believe
heard
that
them say.
That's what I heard as well.
Yeah.
it looks like their intention was only a maximum a foot projection, not 18 inches. So I'm not sure. We might need to clarify that.
I think if they are going to use. I'm trying to imagine.
What's the, let me
Made it
ask,
clear
what's the
that this was-
manufacturers? Do you
This
have
is a decorative feature rather than a solar
I'm going to open the
feature, so-
public hearing, Mr. Platt. I want to get a manufacturer's respond if there is one. What's the standard that they project? I'm sure they have some standards.
The sites do come in very different sizes. In light of the suggestion of recess the glass or protrude the soffit, I am in agreement that this needs to be longer than 12 inches. We will work with you to see what we can come up with. We will talk to the manufacturer.
And to give you some leeway, maybe the larger ones could project out further than the face, and the smaller ones that are more accent, they can sit back closer to the glass, so as they have it, so it becomes a little bit more substantial.
We'll work with the staff to come up with a solution that will meet.
Just work with staff.
Yes.
Was that clear?
Yeah, so we'll work with the applicant to determine the best projection and proportions for the horizontal fin members, possibly emphasizing the longer fins that run this full span with a deeper projection.
I think that's a condition, though.
And yeah.
That is a condition, yeah.
That's what
So
I've got.
deeper meaning it would
More
go
projection.
beyond the face of the
Sure,
building,
yeah.
and then the other ones would be more
Other
of
ones
an
might be at the
accent.
same plane as the building, or
Exactly.
so. We'll also, jumping ahead of my notes, but while we're on it, the larger fins will stay within the window openings rather than wrap the corners.
I think I like that concept because I think it's just going to create these different shadows as it comes out. Because if they're going to come out, let's say if the face of the building comes out 12 inches or 6 inches or whatever they decide, and these fins are coming out 6 inches more than the face of the building, the depth of that in the glass as it wraps around on the face, it's going to be different. So I don't think it's going to really do.
Yeah, there'd have to be a notch in the
It's going to be a
fin do
notch.
that.
So I'd rather keep that within the volume of the glass. I think that would make
Okay,
sense.
so the idea is each facade will be framed by the stucco or the cladding.
Exactly. And the box would be proportioned.
Okay, so that's clear. So we're going to extend the plane of the wall surfaces to expand the volume of the building somewhat to increase the sense of depth between the wall and windows. Going back to the fins, we're going to, for all of this, we'll just make sure that we have detailed drawings that make it clear how these things are going to be attached to both the curtain wall and to the wall surfaces. We will sorry, the notes are a little jumbled. We will increase the recess of the glass so that it's a 6 to 12 inch recess. We will regularize the dimensions of all of these framing elements so that the vertical and horizontal members are consistently dimensioned to bring more consistency to the facades.
To clarify that, it's the framing around the
window bezels,
the window frame,
right?
The plastered section.
We will work with the applicants to study or understand the interior lighting, particularly the front entry bay, to make sure that there's consistent translucency and illumination in those areas so that we don't have dark spots that create a different geometry than what we're seeing in the rendering. On the same bay, we're going to increase the width of the vertical elements to give them a little more solidity, and that would be at both the main building frame as well as the entry frame.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure where this went, but where there's the pharmacy bump out on the west facade, you had mentioned possibly cladding that with the same metal as the vault.
Yeah, but that's on the property line. I don't know how they're going to. I mean,
that's fine.
That's on the property line.
Just leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
Okay. Commissioner Palmer suggested putting evergreen shrubs at the north facade under the trees rather than the grasses, and also recommended ensuring
ground cover would be sufficient.
Any ground cover. Also recommended grasses that are either evergreen grasses or possibly a boxwood hedge or another evergreen.
Just saying, introduce some evergreen within that, so when the grasses are dead,
right,
you have something.
Oh, okay. So allow the grasses, but then bring something
just
else
something
in.
to maintain a base.
The staff original recommendation was that the proposed shrubs and ground cover shall be reconsidered to have less grass species while still being drought tolerant and compatible with the applicable shade or sun locations. Is that would be both for the area at the front of the building and for the planter box at the rear. So I believe we understand your intentions. So
going back to the, I think there will be they can actually do that same way that they're going to stucco this on the property line. Going back to that volume.
Pharmacy, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, just have it consider.
Okay, so I will uncross that out.
I mean, just they have to have a rated construction for that wall. So.
Yeah. They have to do it on both cases.
So we'll make that a consideration. And in terms of building signage, we're going to have a consideration that a monument sign be preferable to other types of building signage if it's a multi-tenant kind of situation. And turn light low, shorten. I think that's everything that I've got.
And I think we acknowledge that the elevation is not how it's going to look. So I don't know if you guys are going to take these elevations and go out there. It's not going to be the same as far as some of these column the volumes that are coming out. And I definitely want to see some sort of a.
There has to be. If you look at the plan, the columns.
It does. So I'm just
the columns are recessed
back. To make sure
back.
that you guys understand that.
Help me.
See here. Here it's certainly flush, but these columns are actually further back in.
Oh, right. They're under the building rather than at the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And you just want us to verify that that's...
No, it is going to be, but I just want to make sure that we understand, because if you take that in there, it's not going to look like that. So
and we always ignore renderings when we're really thinking about what it's going to look like. So,
okay. Do we need to run it again, or are we done? We're okay.
We're done, so
Okay, so I need a motion, please.
I'll move to approve with conditions.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Board Member Malikian, a second by Board Member Palmer. In terms of roll call, Board Member Palmer?
Yes.
Board Member Malikian?
Yes.
Chairman Martin?
Yes.
Motion passes to approve with conditions 3-0. Okay, we have no minutes this evening for review or approval. We do have a last-minute staff announcement by Mr. Alan Loomis.
So that's why.
So that's why he's waiting.
Yeah, I missed the staff announcement, so thank you for the indulgence. Two very quick announcements. To Ms. Palmer, you're concerned about the crosswalk or potential mid-block crosswalk on Los Feliz. The Urban Design and Mobility Division just yesterday released 2 RFPs. One is to develop a citywide pedestrian master plan, and another is concurrent with that to develop a citywide pedestrian safety education programming. So the 2 projects that sort of work hand in hand. The pedestrian master plan is for about $500,000, and the education program is for $1 million. They're both funded by the state's active transportation grant, which is a competitive grant process that the staff won. Glendale actually got 3 awards out of that grant process. I think out of everybody in the state, we got more awards out of our application than anybody else.
Oh, wow.
The education program is also 50% funded by Safe Routes to School. So those 2 RFPs are out on the streets. We're looking for consultants that we'd be interviewing this summer, selecting in the fall, and really getting started on a multi-year project on those pedestrian safety issues starting in the fall. So I think I took a mental note that we need to look at that Los Feliz
I think they
block
use
crossing.
that street a lot because it's at the ER.
Yeah.
So at the end of the study, is there going to be any kind of actual proposal for improvements, or is there funding?
Yeah, the
for
goal
that?
with the pedestrian master plan is to be similar to the bike master plan, which it would actually detail out very specifically this intersection, enact these kinds of improvements, at this corridor do these kinds of improvements. So it'd be a roadmap or a master plan that would guide future CIP work, future grants that we could go after to actually pour concrete and do paint and plant street trees and that sort of stuff. The second announcement is that the department's very happy and pleased to inform you that we received a implementation award from the American Planning Association's Los Angeles chapter for the work we've done on the Downtown Specific Plan over the past 8 years. And even more fun for us is that the award ceremony is actually going to be at the Alex Theater.
Wow.
This year. Unfortunately for you, is that the awards ceremony is on June 25th, your next meeting. So you'll probably miss the awards ceremony. We would love to have you here, but I know we have at least 2 or 3 cases on the agenda. So if you're feeling short-staffed that evening, it's because everybody's going to be at the awards ceremony, most of the staff. But there is an after-party, I think, being hosted at the famous or the Moose Den Lodge. So when you finish your
Downstairs.
meeting. Yeah.
By hosted, do you mean hosted?
Well, located at, I think it's the after-party that you pay for yourself. So in any event, after the meeting, if you want to join us for
definitely
at the Moose Den, would be very happy to see you. So thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Adjourn.
Thank you.